The United States, you should know, under President Trump, above all, wants to avoid war.
2 points with due respect to the distinguished American panelist. The Philippines. Allow me to announce it for the record. To have U.S. operating military bases in the Philippines today is against the Philippine Constitution.
So China is today threatening all of its neighbors in the South China Sea. So I think a peaceful China would not be speaking the way Dr. Gao is speaking today.
Therefore, from the Chinese view, the world in the future, according to my personal dream, for example, should be a world of peace, a world every country will be treated equal. Every country respects each other.
But China it seems to want to be able to destroy the world over 10 times, 50 times.
Today we are reacting to a revealing exchange on China-USA tensions and who is to blame for it between Dr. Victor Gao and Elliot Abrams, who has served in foreign policy positions for Presidents Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump. But before we begin, if you enjoy this kind of content, please subscribe. It really helps support the channel.
Victor, let me start with you. Do you think that recent actions by the Trump administration has revealed what America maybe hasn't admitted for a long time, that it is really concerned by China's rise and perhaps considers it a threat to its global dominance?
Thank you very much for having me. First of all, China's rise is inevitable. No one can stop it. The United States cannot stop it. That's the mega trend. Secondly, this trade war launched by President Trump and his government against the whole world, including China, is the wrong war. And it's not constructive. It throws all the rules of the game out of the window. It damages the free trade. And while different countries need to come up with strategies, how do they want to deal with the United States in this manhandling of mankind, China has decided to rise up to the occasion and strongly defend the free trade. China will fight to the end, as the government has declared, and China has now imposed a retaliatory tariff up to 125% against all U.S. exports to China. Now, if things are not handled well, this means complete stop of China-U.S. trade, both ways. No goods exported from the United States to China, and complete stop of everything made in China to the United States. This is decoupling. If the United States wants to really welcome this, China will reciprocate, and causing the breakup of China-US relations. Whether this will evolve from peace to war, well, let's all be prepared. In essence, what China now declares is that it is prepared to fight to the end. Trade war, tariff war, technology war, or real war. So the ball is in Trump's court. You decide, and I will reciprocate. I will never succumb to the US pressure. And this is the moment of truth. China wants to defend free trade. The United States wants to destroy free trade.
Right.
The rest of the world is watching, and there will be a choice by the end of the day.
The problem that the United States has with China is not its rise, it is China's conduct. First of all, China, from the day it joined the World Trade Organization, has never believed in free trade, and it has not practiced free trade. It has taken advantage of the WTO to build up its own economy at the expense of other economies, and it has used its power to threaten neighbors. For example, the Philippines. That's just one very good example. Or Vietnam, there's another example. Or Taiwan, there's another example. The problem is not China's rise, which I agree is inevitable, and which ought to favor the people of China and really the people of the whole world. But it isn't doing so because of the way China is actually conducting itself.
Dr. Gao cut straight to the point. China's rise is inevitable. And Abrams admits it too. He calls it inevitable, but he switches to conduct, the behavior. He thinks China never believed in free trade, but then why did American multinationals rush in? It is clear that the system was profitable for everyone. The moment China started moving up the value chain, suddenly the rules were unfair. Trump didn't launch tariffs to fix trade imbalances. Think about it. When he launched initially the tariffs globally, He included islands where there are only penguins, or countries like Madagascar. Do you really think the people from Madagascar has the purchasing power to buy from America as much as Americans buy or import from Madagascar? This is complete nonsense. But Dr. Gao is right. China will not allow anyone unfair treatment. When you slap retaliatory tariffs on the world's largest trading partner, you aren't defending free trade. And Mr. Abrams wants to frame this as China threatens its neighbors. But the real threat is a superpower so addicted to dominance that it would rather torch the global trading system than share the top seat.
A lot of the US's allies would argue that perhaps the US's conduct doesn't represent that of a global leader anymore either.
Well, I wouldn't defend every single thing that President Trump has done. But I think if you look at the Philippines as a good example. There was a point at which the United States had bases in the Philippines. The Philippines told us, you should leave. So we left. Now, the Philippines being threatened by China, the Philippines is asking us to help with their defense. So we're helping. I think that's the way a friend should behave. Now, when it comes to tariffs, I think what President Trump is really saying is, look, China wants to manufacture every single thing that people are buying in the world and slowly but surely hollow out their own manufacturing. It isn't just the US that is saying that's not acceptable. I think you'll increasingly find the Europeans saying that that's not acceptable either. So I think what President Trump is trying to do is to say that unfair trade practices are not going to be permitted. Now, Victor says he wants free trade. I don't really think we've seen free trade on the part of China over the last couple of decades recently, and particularly under Xi Jinping.
2 points with due respect to the distinguished American panelist. The Philippines. Allow me to announce it for the record. To have U.S. operating military bases in the Philippines today is against the Philippine Constitution. So you are engaged in the illegal activity in the Philippines according to the explicit provisions of the Filipino Constitution. So my advice is go to check out the Filipino Constitution and see whether your operation in the Philippines is legal or not. Secondly, it's very evident that the United States wants to turn the Philippines into a proxy and even wants to go far to provoke some conflict between China and the Philippines so that it can benefit its geopolitical ambitions against China. This is a very explicit game plan. We can see it very clearly. The Filipino boundary is well demarcated by the Spanish-American Treaty 1898. Everything that belonged to the Philippines was handed over by the Spanish Empire to the United States. It was, again, very much declared, very clearly defined when Japan surrendered. Everything belonging to the Philippines was handed over by the Japanese occupier to General MacArthur. So anything which was not in the U.S.-Spanish Treaty of 1898 did not belong to the Philippines.
Melinda makes an observation that even America's allies don't recognize this as leadership anymore. Abrams wants to paint the US as the loyal friend rushing back to defend the Philippines, but regardless of your position in this matter, Manila has become a proxy, and it favors America's interest in the region. Abrams also claims China wants to manufacture everything and hollow out the West. Let's be real, the West hollowed out its own manufacturing when it shipped jobs overseas chasing profits. China built the capacity while others cashed out. Now that the bill came due, Trump wants to tariff his way back to 1985. It doesn't work that way.
Well, first of all, this behavior on the part of China, to which I was referring, which belligerent behavior, I would call it, that has led so many of its neighbors to fear it, has been growing slowly but steadily over the last, 15 years, let's say, really since Xi Jinping took over. So it has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It is true that President Trump would like to be able to concentrate more and more on the American economy. But what does that mean? For one thing, it means dealing with China and trade with China. It means dealing with the fact that most Americans, and this is really bipartisan, most Americans have come to the conclusion that China today, under Xi Jinping, is a greatly expansionist military and economic power that is trying to achieve dominance first in Asia, but then outside of Asia. So I wouldn't focus too much on the Trump administration. And in fact, to the extent that we want to, Trump has made it very clear that his main concern outside the United States is China. That's why the tariff policy is focused so much on China rather than, for example, on Europe. Free trade would not permit the massive, massive theft of intellectual property in which China has been engaging for decades and is still engaging today. That's not part of free trade. The United States, as you should know, under President Trump, above all, wants to avoid war. He is currently engaged in an effort to bring the war in Ukraine to an end, to bring the war in Gaza to an end. A negotiation with Iran has just commenced. So the last thing President Trump wants is foreign wars. But what he is doing is, to begin with, protecting the American economy. And that's not a declaration of war. That is an effort which I think any government would undertake to protect its own people and its own economy from practices that, in his words, have robbed the American people and the American economy over the last few decades. So I think Dr. Gao is being quite belligerent in his rhetoric. I'm not entirely sure why. Donald Trump is not threatening war against China. But the United States does have some treaties with Japan, for example, defense treaties. And we're not prepared to see China run roughshod over the rights of all of its neighbors.
Mr. Abrams resorts to blame China for everything and immediately acts surprised because Dr. Gao pushes back. According to Mr. Abrams, China's belligerent behavior started 15 years ago, predating Trump. So what? Dr. Gao never said Trump invented the anxiety that America has about China's rise. He is arguing Trump's trade war is the wrong response. And even if there's a bipartisan consensus that China is expansionist, that's not an argument. When both parties in Washington agree on something, it usually means the military-industrial complex agree. The American people weren't asked if they wanted a tech war that kills their semiconductor supply chains or tariffs that jack up their grocery bills. But I believe the insanity hits when Abrams also wants credit for Trump for avoiding wars. This guy must be in a parallel universe. And if that's not enough, he labels Dr. Gao as belligerent for saying China will defend itself. A little bit of projection, perhaps. He must have forgotten that America has 800 military bases, but calls Dr. Gao aggressive when asserting there are limits.
Vice President J.D. Vance recently said, to make it a little more crystal clear, I'm quoting here, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. So it's maybe not a declaration of war, but it's certainly not a show of respect to another global leader. Is this how a world superpower should behave?
Well, J.D. Vance and I went to the same law school, Yale Law School. I was 20 years ahead of him. I'm ashamed by what J.D. Vance said, because he kept talking about the Chinese peasants, etc. Let me make the simple point. The urban population in China is about 3 times as big as the total population in the United States. The middle class in China is more than the total number of the people in the United States. So if J.D. Vance comes to China, he could barely find a peasant at all, because he will see the urban population. And by today, China is one of the leading industrialized nations in the world. Now, talking about intellectual property, let me emphasize one point very briefly. China now has more patent approved every year than the United States. China is a leading nation of protecting IPR. So no more use those misinformation or mislabeling to describe China. China is a fierce defender of the intellectual property rights for its own good, for mankind's good. And the United States has accused China of intellectual theft for something which it does not even have. And Huawei now has more powerful intellectual property rights, creating more wonderful, miraculous products than anything that the United States can dream about. So if you want to talk about RPR, we can spend an hour talking about RPR, but let's talk back about this trade war. The trade war launched by Trump is wrong. It's the wrong war. It's the war against mankind.
Right.
China is fighting back, and China views this the moment of defending open trade and free trade. Lighthizer even said, no trade is free. That means his mind and his soul are not free. He's suffering from demons. He's suffering from all these ulterior motivations. In China, we advocate free trade. China is the largest trading partner with more than 140 countries in the world. This is a convincing evidence that by practicing free trade, China is number one in terms of international trade with the rest of the world.
I guess I'm not surprised, but I'm struck by the rhetoric that Dr. Gao is using, which is a rhetoric of war, 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 which is, again, the last thing the United States or Donald Trump, President Trump, wants. But this is, I think, this is indicative of the kind of wolf warrior diplomacy, as it's called, that Xi Jinping's China has adopted. And it is exactly that to which the United States is responding.
We were talking there about intellectual property. So let me ask you both this. What will determine global dominance in the future? It was simply currently or in the past the size of a country's defense budget. If you had big military, you were a big superpower. Will that change? Is it going to be R&D, innovation, AI? I'll ask you, Mr. Abrams, first. Will that play a greater role in the future? Maybe not overtake defense, but is it going to be more important in maintaining global dominance?
I think so. I wouldn't use the term global dominance, but I would use the term economic and military power. Both are much more linked now to high tech. We began to see that in the war in Iraq, which is, 20 years ago now. And we see more of it with artificial intelligence. And I think you can't find a military analyst today who would not say that tomorrow's military power is greatly linked not just to the industrial plant of a country, but to the highest levels of technological advancement. I think that is true.
Dr. Gao's point is simple. The US is operating on a 30-year-old stereotype, and it's a dangerous delusion. If the US is going to accuse China of theft, they need to explain why China now registers more patents annually than the United States. You can't be the victim of theft and simultaneously be outpaced in innovation. Huawei is the IP leader in the very standards, 5G, Wi-Fi 7, that power modern connectivity. Let's listen quickly to Jensen Huang talking precisely about this point.
9 out of the 10 top science and technology schools in the world are now in China. They lead in science and technology in many different fields. This has completely flipped in the last half to a decade. We used to lead most of them, now they lead most of them. They have a large population of highly qualified students. Absolutely. Number one. Number two, 50% of the world's AI researchers are Chinese. Third, 70% of last year's AI patents are published by China. The ecosystem of AI in China is vibrant, rich, incredibly innovative. They work incredibly hard. This is a country with an enormous might.
The gap between Huawei's infrastructure dominance and its consumer/cloud struggles is almost entirely a function of geopolitical pressure, not product quality or innovation capacity. Abrams ignored the facts about the urban population, ignored the facts about patents, and instead resorted to a talking point about rhetoric, because he can't counter Dr. Gao's points on the merits. When Dr. Gao says the trade war is wrong, He is voicing the frustration of a nation that is simply defending free trade, and Abrams wants to play the victim, but the numbers tell otherwise. China has 140 trading partners.
We're talking about the military budget. The US military budget is larger than the next 10 countries' military budget combined together. So the United States has a lot of military budget, a lot of equipment, etc. That's for sure. Now, the point I want to make is that if you can destroy the world 1,000 times versus, for example, if you can have the world destroyed 10 times, there is not a lot of difference. Now, in the world of nuclear age, mutually assured destruction is the rule of the game. Between China and the United States, they have already reached mutually assured destruction if any country wants to use war as an instrument to achieve its geopolitical goals. Both China and the United States can destroy each other multiple times, regardless of whether the United States has a larger budget or otherwise. Therefore, from the Chinese view, the world in the future, according to my personal dream, for example, should be a world of peace, a world every country will be treated equal. Every country respects each other, and no country will be allowed to dominate against any other country. MAGA, or Make America Great Again, is fine, but you cannot achieve that at the expense of other countries. You cannot achieve your greatness by belittling, by delegating or relegating other countries to the lowest echelon of the hierarchy. Every country has its ambition. Every country wants to be in the first front, first row, for example, and no country should be allowed to trample rules of free trade, to trample international order, and to dictate to others, to issue ultimatum, to hold a gun at your head, to demand submission to my will. This is the law of the jungle, and China will never have a part of that, and China will fight to death to oppose that.
Can I just say, yeah, if that were the policy of China, then first, China would not be massively expanding its nuclear weapons, which the United States is not doing, but China is. It seems to want to be able to destroy the world over 10 times, 50 times, 100 times. Secondly, China would not be massively expanding its conventional strength, which won't really have any effect on the United States and our nuclear standoff. The purpose of that is to intimidate neighbors.
Everyone knows that the United States has the largest, if not one of the two largest nuclear arsenals in the world, and China's warheads added up together only account for a fraction of that of the United States. That's number one. Number two, in terms of conventional weapons, China is a complete match against the United States. And China does not want to look at its neighboring country. We have 14 land neighboring countries. We have 6 maritime neighboring countries. No one is a match against China. China's military buildup, if it is real, is basically to prevent the United States using war as an instrument, try to surprise China and try to wrestle China down, or to delay China, to derail China's peaceful rise. That's the only purpose. China is making sure that the American gets the message. If you want to impose war on China, you get war. If you want to destroy China, you get destroyed. If you want to bomb China out with nuclear weapons, you will be wiped out with nuclear weapons. That's the mutually assured destruction theory, mad theory, that everyone in Pentagon, everyone in Washington, D.C. should fully know about. China is not going to be pushed around, and China will fight to the end, one way or another, peacefully or otherwise. So the choice is in Washington. China wants to be a partner of the United States, rather than being a slave of the United States or being a subordinate of the United States.
China is today threatening all of its neighbors in the South China Sea. So I think a peaceful China would not be speaking the way Dr. Gao is speaking today.
Still no accountability. If China wants peace, why build up nukes? But this is intellectual dishonesty. Dr. Gao rightly pointed out that the US military budget is bigger than the next 10 countries combined. So when Abrams claims the US is not expanding its nuclear weapons, that is a statistical trick. The US is already sitting on an arsenal so massive that it can destroy the globe thousands of times. Dr. Gao is not advocating for war. He is advocating for deterrence so that war never happens. But let's address the most egregious claim, that China is expanding its conventional forces to intimidate neighbors. China shares borders with 14 land neighbors and 6 maritime neighbors. Dr. Gao stated a simple and undeniable fact: not one of them is a match for China. If China's intention were domination or intimidation, they wouldn't need a massive military buildup to achieve that. They already have the demographic, economic, and geographic size to dwarf their neighbors. But Abrams couldn't even formulate a proper rebuttal. China's military modernization is to ensure that the United States cannot use military might as a tool to suppress China's growth. But if the US chooses mutual respect, China is ready to cooperate. Well, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the discussion, please like and subscribe, and let me know, will we get to a day where the tensions between these two superpowers end? Or is this not a realistic goal? See you in the next one.